Imagine standing on a beach at night. The waves roll in, the moon reflects off the surface, and everything feels calm, familiar, maybe even a little romantic. Now imagine peeling that ocean downward, layer by layer, like lifting the floors off a skyscraper until the lights fade, the noise disappears, and the idea of up starts to lose its meaning. Eventually, you reach a point where the ocean no longer feels like water. It feels like a void. This is where the Abyssopelagic zone begins, and it is the moment the ocean quietly reveals that it has been keeping some very big secrets from us. If this slow descent into the Abyssopelagic zone, where the ocean becomes vast and silent, helps you unwind tonight, please like the video, subscribe to the Deep Sea Documentary channel, and leave a comment sharing when and where you're listening. So this calm science can reach more people who fall asleep to the deepest parts of the sea. The word abyss tends to get used casually, like when someone loses their keys or checks their bank account. But in the ocean, abyss is not a metaphor. It is a physical place, vast beyond intuition, stretching across much of the planet like a shadow beneath the waves. This is not the dramatic, monster-filled darkness of movie scenes. It is something stranger. It is a calm, steady darkness that has been sitting there for millions of years, completely uninterested in whether we understand it or not. What makes the Abyssopelagic zone so unsettling is not just how deep it is, but how quiet it feels conceptually. On land, even the most remote deserts and mountains still feel connected to the world. Wind moves, animals pass through, time feels busy, but the abyss feels paused. It is a place where movement is minimal, change is slow, and events happen on timescales that make human impatience look adorable. If the surface ocean is a bustling city, the abyss is an empty cathedral the size of a continent, where the echoes take centuries to fade. And yet, this silent vastness is not empty. That is the first illusion the abyss plays on us. From above, it feels like nothing could possibly live there. No light, no warmth, no obvious food. It sounds less like a habitat and more like a punishment. But life, as it turns out, is incredibly stubborn. The abyss is not a graveyard. It is a functioning world, running on rules that feel almost alien compared to our own. The organisms here are not surviving by accident. They are specialists, finely tuned to conditions that would instantly end most surface life. Evolution did not just adapt here. It leaned back, crossed its arms, and said, "All right, let's get weird." Part of what makes this zone so fascinating is how much of Earth it actually occupies. We tend to think of our planet as forests, cities, and continents, with oceans acting as background decoration. In reality, the deep ocean dominates Earth's living space. The Abyssopelagic zone alone covers enormous stretches of the seafloor, quietly making up a huge portion of the environment where life exists. It is not a small side chapter of Earth's story. It is one of the main volumes, and we have barely cracked the cover. There is also something humbling about how inaccessible this place is. And humans have sent people to the moon more times than they have visited large portions of the abyss. It is not because we lack curiosity. It is because the abyss does not care about our curiosity. It does not make entry easy. It does not forgive mistakes. It does not reward arrogance. Down there, Technology is not impressive. It is merely tolerated, and only briefly. Visiting the abyss is less like exploration, and more like asking permission from a very old, very quiet giant. Emotionally, the abyss triggers a strange mix of fear and calm. Fear, because it reminds us how small we are. Calm, because it exists entirely outside our chaos. Wars, trends, arguments, and deadlines mean absolutely nothing at these depths. The abyss has outlasted civilizations without ever noticing them. It will likely outlast many more. There is something oddly comforting about that, like realizing the universe will be fine even if you forget to answer an email. So this is where our journey begins. Not with a monster jumping out of the dark, not with a sudden scream or flashing teeth, but with silence. A silence so complete that it forces us to listen differently. The Abyssopelagic zone is not here to scare us. It is here to remind us that most of our planet lives beyond our senses, beyond our daily concerns, and beyond our assumptions about what life needs to exist. And once you start paying attention to that silence, you realize it is not empty at all. It is full of stories, patiently waiting in the dark. To understand the Abyssopelagic zone, the first thing we need to do is let go of how we normally think about depth. On land, depth is easy. You dig a hole, and it gets darker, maybe wetter, and eventually you hit something solid and call it a day. In the ocean, depth is not a hole. It is a vertical universe. When scientists talk about the Abyssopelagic zone, they are not pointing to a single location but to a massive horizontal layer of water and seafloor that begins around 4,000 meters below the surface and extends down to about 6,000 meters. That may sound like a tidy range on paper, but in reality, it represents one of the most extreme transitions on Earth. By the time you reach 4,000 meters, you have already passed through every environment that feels even vaguely familiar to humans. This is the point where sunlight is not merely dim or filtered. It is completely absent. Not a single photon from the sun survives this journey. Our light does not fade gradually into the abyss. It vanishes decisively, like a stage light snapping off mid-performance. From this depth onward, the ocean exists in permanent night, and it has been that way for millions of years without complaint. This depth range also marks a psychological boundary as much as a physical one. Above it, the ocean still feels like an extension of the surface world. Below it, the rules change. 4,000 meters is deep enough that even the most optimistic diver would realize they have made several poor life choices. 6,000 meters, meanwhile, is so far down that the water above you weighs more than entire mountain ranges. The Abyssopelagic zone occupies this space between those two depths, not as a narrow band, but as a sprawling layer that blankets huge portions of the ocean floor like a heavy, silent ceiling. What makes this depth range especially fascinating is how stable it is. Near the surface, the ocean is chaotic. Waves rise and fall, seasons shift, storms rearrange everything, and temperatures swing wildly. In contrast, the Abyssopelagic zone exists in a state of near-permanent consistency. Day and night are meaningless concepts here. Seasons do not exist. The environment you experience at 4,000 meters is nearly identical to the one you experience at 6,000. Not just across distance, but across time. A creature living here today would recognize the conditions from tens of thousands of years ago. Change in the abyss is a slow negotiation. This depth also redefines scale. Humans are used to thinking horizontally. While we measure distances by how long it takes to drive somewhere or how many steps it takes to cross a room, the Abyssopelagic zone forces us to think vertically, and that is where intuition starts to fail. 4,000 meters is deeper than most mountains at all. 6,000 meters is approaching the depth of the tallest structures we could stack if we piled skyscrapers on top of each other and then calmly pushed them into the sea. The abyss is not just deep, it is offensively deep, as if the planet itself wanted to see how far it could go. Another strange aspect of this zone is how invisible it is from above. Satellites can map continents, forests, and ice caps in stunning detail, but the Abyssopelagic zone remains largely hidden beneath kilometers of water. From space, it does not look like much. Just a blue surface, calm and unassuming. Beneath that surface, however, the abyss stretches out, flat and immense, covering areas larger than entire countries. It is one of the largest habitats on Earth, and yet it is completely out of sight, like a massive room in your house that you somehow forgot existed. This depth range also marks the point where exploration becomes exceptionally difficult. The deeper you go, the more unforgiving the environment becomes, and the Abyssopelagic zone sits firmly in the realm where engineering meets its limits. Visiting this layer requires specialized vehicles, meticulous planning, and a willingness to accept that failure is not an option. Down here, there is no quick ascent, no rescue team waiting nearby. The abyss is not hostile, but it is utterly indifferent, which somehow feels worse. By defining the Abyssopelagic zone by depth, we begin to understand why it feels so alien. It is not just deep water. It is a boundary beyond which the ocean stops behaving like the ocean we know. It is a region defined by absence, not of life, but of the things we rely on to make sense of the world. No sunlight, no surface connection, just an enormous vertical expanse, quietly existing beneath our feet, reminding us that most of Earth lies far below the places we call home. Pressure is one of those ideas that sounds abstract until it suddenly becomes very personal. On the surface, pressure is polite. It sits quietly around you, holding the atmosphere in place, gently reminding your ears to pop on airplanes. In the Abyssopelagic zone, pressure stops being polite. It becomes the dominant personality in the room, as the kind that leans in too close and reminds you who is in charge. Down here, pressure is not a background condition. It is the environment. The reason pressure becomes so intense in the deep ocean is deceptively simple. Water is heavy, and it stacks. Every layer presses down on the one below it, and the deeper you go, the more layers pile on. By the time you reach the abyss, the amount of water overhead is so enormous that it presses on everything equally, relentlessly, and without pause. There are no breaks, no pressure-free moments. It is a constant, full-body squeeze that never relaxes, not even for a second. Imagine being hugged by the entire ocean at once. Except the hug is not affectionate and definitely voids most warranties. What makes this pressure especially fascinating is that it does not behave like force in our everyday experience. If you push on something from one direction, it bends or breaks in predictable ways. Pressure in the abyss comes from all directions at once. Up, down, sideways, diagonally, emotionally. Every square inch of an object feels the same immense force simultaneously. This means that shape matters more than strength. A solid steel cube can fail spectacularly, while a well-designed sphere can survive. This is why deep-sea vehicles tend to look less like submarines from action movies and more like floating metal bubbles having an existential crisis. Pressure also has a strange relationship with emptiness. Anything that contains air, gas, or even tiny pockets of space becomes vulnerable. As pressure increases, those pockets shrink, or collapse, or vanish entirely. This is why everyday objects behave so dramatically when exposed to deep-sea conditions. Foam crushes into dense bricks. Plastic bottles implode, like they suddenly remembered a childhood embarrassment. Even incredibly strong materials can fail if they contain internal gaps. In the abyss, being hollow is a liability. For engineers, pressure is the ultimate design challenge. It does not care how impressive something looks on the surface. It does not care about optimism. Every bolt, seam, and window must be built with the assumption that the ocean is actively trying to turn the vehicle into modern art. This is why deep-sea exploration progresses slowly. It is not a lack of curiosity holding us back. It is the reality that pressure makes mistakes permanent and unforgiving. And when something fails under that kind of force, it does not fail gently. Pressure also changes how materials behave at a fundamental level. Metals compress slightly. Liquids behave differently. Chemical reactions can shift in subtle ways. Even the properties of water itself are altered under extreme pressure, becoming denser and behaving in ways that feel counterintuitive. The abyss is not just a deeper version of the surface ocean. It is a physically different place, where familiar rules still apply, but they apply with far more intensity and far less mercy. One of the most unsettling aspects of abyssal pressure is how invisible it is. There is no sound, no warning, no visible cue that it is there. If you were somehow able to exist at those depths without protection, you would not feel pressure building gradually like a headache. The force would simply be present, everywhere, all at once. It is a reminder that some of the most powerful forces in nature are also the quietest. Pressure does not roar, it waits. This crushing environment also explains why the abyss remained unexplored for so long. Before modern materials and careful engineering, there was simply no practical way to survive it. Wooden ships, metal hulls, early diving equipment, all of it was hopelessly unprepared for the deep. The abyss was not mysterious because it was hidden. It was mysterious because it was physically inaccessible. Pressure drew a hard line and said, "You may observe from afar." Understanding pressure in the Abyssopelagic zone forces us to rethink what strength really means. It is not about resisting force head-on. It is about accommodating it, distributing it, and accepting that you cannot overpower the ocean. You can only coexist with it briefly on its terms. Down here, pressure is not an obstacle to overcome. It is the defining feature of the world itself, quietly reminding everything that enters the abyss exactly where it stands in the hierarchy of nature. If pressure is the abyss's strength, temperature is its mood, and that mood is permanently, unwaveringly cold. Not dramatic cold, not blizzard cold, not the kind of cold that comes with wind, snow, or seasonal excuses. This is a calm, patient cold that has settled into the Abyssopelagic zone and decided to stay forever. Down here, the water hovers just above the freezing point, and it does so with a consistency that would make even the most reliable thermostat feel inadequate. What makes abyssal cold so remarkable is not how extreme it is, but how steady it remains. On the surface, temperature is chaotic. Days warm up, nights cool down, seasons swing wildly, and weather systems treat stability like an optional suggestion. In the abyss, none of that matters. Sunlight does not reach these depths, so there is no daily heating cycle, no summer warmth, no winter chill. The abyss does not know what a season is. and frankly, it is not interested in learning. The temperature stays nearly the same year after year, century after century, as if time itself slowed down just to match the vibe. This cold exists because the abyss is cut off from the energy source that warms most of our planet. Heat from the sun drives weather, ocean currents near the surface, and the warmth we associate with life-friendly environments. Remove that energy input, and the ocean settles into a baseline state dictated by physics rather than sunshine. The abyssopelagic zone represents that baseline, the temperature water naturally wants to be when left alone long enough. It is Earth's default ocean setting, and it is chilly. The consistency of this cold has profound implications. Without temperature swings, the abyss becomes a place of thermal predictability. Nothing here experiences heat stress or cold snaps. There are no sudden freezes, no warm currents rushing in to shake things up. This stability allows processes to occur slowly and steadily, without interruption. It also means that anything living here must be perfectly comfortable operating at low temperatures all the time. There is no warming up. There is no cool-down period. Cold is the job requirement. Cold water behaves differently than warm water, and the abyss takes full advantage of that. As water cools, it becomes denser, which helps explain why these deep layers remain isolated beneath lighter, warmer water above. This density acts like a barrier, locking the abyss into its cold state and preventing surface warmth from easily mixing downward. The result is a deep ocean environment that is thermally isolated, like a refrigerated vault that no one ever opens. Temperature also affects chemistry in subtle but important ways. Chemical reactions generally slow down in colder conditions. Molecules move less, collisions happen less frequently, and processes that would zip along near the surface become deliberate and drawn out. In the abyss, nothing happens in a hurry. Chemical changes unfold at a pace that would feel painfully slow to us. But to the abyss, it is just normal operating speed. This slow-motion chemistry shapes everything from how materials break down to how nutrients are processed. Another strange consequence of this cold is how it preserves things. Low temperatures slow decay, meaning objects that reach the abyss can remain surprisingly unchanged for long periods. Shipwrecks, for example, can persist far longer in deep, cold water than they would in warmer, shallower seas. The abyss acts like a natural archive, quietly storing remnants of human history and natural events alike. It does not actively preserve them, but it certainly does not rush to erase them either. For human technology, abyssal cold presents a different challenge than pressure. Electronics behave differently. Lubricants thicken. Materials contract. Our systems designed for surface conditions suddenly feel sluggish and unreliable. Engineers must account for the fact that nothing down here will ever warm up on its own. If something needs heat, it must bring its own, because the abyss is not sharing. Emotionally, the idea of such unchanging cold is unsettling. Humans are creatures of variation. We expect warmth, relief, and contrast. The abyss offers none of that. It is cold in the same way a desert is dry, not as an event, but as a defining characteristic. This constancy reinforces the feeling that the abyss is removed from the rhythms of the surface world. It does not respond to the sun. It does not react to weather. It simply exists, cold and patient. In the abyssopelagic zone, temperature is not a challenge to overcome or a condition to escape. It is a constant companion, while shaping everything without drama or negotiation. This steady cold is part of what makes the abyss feel timeless, like a place that has settled into its final form and sees no reason to change. Darkness on the surface is temporary and polite. It arrives at night, lingers for a few hours, and then leaves without causing an existential crisis. Even in the darkest places on land, there is usually some trace of light. Starlight, moonlight, the glow of distant cities reminding you that civilization is still awake somewhere. The Abyssopelagic zone does not offer that courtesy. Its darkness is absolute, uninterrupted, and permanent. It is not the absence of light for a few hours. It is the complete removal of light as a concept. By the time you reach these depths, the last usable traces of sunlight have already been absorbed far above. There is no dim glow, no blue haze, no suggestion of dawn waiting patiently overhead. Light simply does not exist here. If you were to turn off a flashlight in the abyss, it would not feel darker than night. It would feel unchanged. Darkness is the default setting, and anything brighter than pitch black is an intrusion. This kind of darkness fundamentally reshapes how space is perceived. On the surface, vision dominates our understanding of the world. We identify threats, opportunities, and objects almost entirely through sight. In the abyss, vision becomes unreliable to the point of absurdity. Distance loses meaning because you cannot see far enough to judge it. Direction becomes ambiguous because there are no visual landmarks. Even the concept of looking around feels silly when there is nothing to look at. Yet the abyss does not reward curiosity through sight. It demands different senses entirely. True darkness also erases the horizon. On land or at sea, the horizon gives us context. It tells us where we are, how far we can see, and how large the world feels. In the abyss, there is no horizon. There is no frame of reference. Everything beyond arm's reach might as well be infinite. This creates a psychological effect that is difficult to describe without experiencing it. The world does not feel small or large. It feels undefined, as if space itself has decided not to explain itself. The absence of light also means the absence of shadows. Shadows require contrast, and contrast requires light. Without them, shapes become meaningless even when something is close. An object a few meters away is not partially visible. It is completely invisible. This makes movement through the abyss profoundly disorienting. You are not navigating through darkness. You are navigating through nothingness, punctuated only by whatever light you bring with you. Artificial light, when introduced, behaves strangely in this environment. A beam from a submersible does not gently illuminate the surroundings. It carves a sharp tunnel through the dark, revealing a narrow slice of reality, while everything else remains hidden. The edges of the light feel abrupt, like the world simply ends where the beam stops. This creates a constant sense that you are seeing only a tiny fraction of what is around you, and that the rest is waiting patiently just beyond the glow. Darkness also changes how time feels. On the surface, light structures our lives. Morning signals activity, night signals rest. In the abyss, there is no external cue to mark the passage of time. Minutes, hours, and days blur together because nothing changes visually. The environment looks the same now as it will later. This timelessness reinforces the feeling that the abyss exists outside normal experience, detached from the cycles that govern life above. The absence of light also strips away aesthetic distractions. There are no colours unless something produces its own light. There are no scenic views, no dramatic landscapes to admire from a distance. Everything must be encountered up close, revealed only when you are already committed. The abyss does not offer previews. It does not tease. It reveals itself only when forced to, and even then, only partially. For humans, this level of darkness triggers a deep, instinctive unease. Yet our brains are wired to associate darkness with danger, uncertainty, and vulnerability. In the abyss, that instinct is constantly activated, even though nothing is actively threatening you. The darkness itself becomes the presence. It is not hiding something necessarily. It is simply there, vast and uninterested in your comfort. In the Abyssopelagic zone, darkness is not a feature layered on top of the environment. It is the environment. It defines space, perception, and experience. Vision, the sense we trust most, becomes optional at best and misleading at worst. And in that total absence of light, the ocean reveals one of its most unsettling truths. The world does not need to be seen to exist. When people imagine the bottom of the ocean, they often picture jagged rocks, dramatic cliffs, or deep chasms straight out of a fantasy novel. At the abyssal seafloor, however, is far less theatrical at first glance. It is mostly flat. Broad open plains stretch for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers, covered in fine sediment that settles so gently it barely stirs. If landscapes had personalities, the abyssal plain would be the quiet minimalist who owns exactly 3 pieces of furniture and sees no reason to add more. But this apparent simplicity is deceptive. The abyssal seafloor is not empty, and it is certainly not inactive. It is a place where time moves differently, where events unfold so slowly that calling them events feels a little generous. These plains are built grain by grain, as tiny particles drift down from above and settle into layers over unimaginably long periods. Each centimetre of sediment represents years, sometimes centuries, of accumulation. On the ground beneath the abyss is not just dirt. It is a historical record, quietly storing the story of the ocean, one speck at a time. The sediment itself is incredibly fine, often compared to dust or soft mud. Unlike sandy beaches shaped by waves and tides, the abyssal seafloor is shaped by patience. There are no storms down here to churn things up, no current strong enough to rearrange the landscape quickly. Once a particle settles, it is likely to stay put for a very long time. This creates an environment that is remarkably stable, but also extremely sensitive. A single disturbance can leave marks that persist for decades, like footprints in a place where nothing ever comes along to erase them. Despite its flatness, the abyssal seafloor is not perfectly uniform. Gentle rises, subtle depressions, and occasional features break the monotony. These variations are often so slight they would be imperceptible without careful measurement. Yet they can influence how materials accumulate and how life organizes itself across the plain. In a world where change is rare, even small differences matter. A slight slope can determine where sediments gather, or where certain organisms choose to settle, turning minor features into long-term influences. One of the most fascinating aspects of the abyssal seafloor is how little it is disturbed. On land, landscapes are constantly reshaped by erosion, weather, and living organisms. In shallow oceans, waves and currents perform the same role. The abyss is different. Its seafloor is one of the most stable surfaces on Earth. This stability allows processes to unfold at a glacial pace, whilst making the abyss an ideal place for studying slow, geological, and biological interactions that would be erased elsewhere. This slow pace also means that the abyssal seafloor holds onto evidence. Tracks left by moving organisms can remain visible long after they were made. Small mounds, depressions, and patterns in the sediment tell stories of movement, feeding, and interaction, even though nothing appears to be happening in real time. To an untrained eye, the plane looks lifeless. To someone who knows how to read it, it is covered in signatures of activity, like a crime scene where the suspects are extremely patient. Another defining feature of the abyssal seafloor is its sheer scale. These plains make up one of the largest continuous environments on the planet. They extend beneath multiple ocean basins, connecting regions that seem distant on the surface, but are neighbours in the deep. This vastness reinforces the feeling that the abyss is not a collection of isolated spots, but a continuous world with its own geography, rhythms, and rules. Human encounters with the abyssal seafloor are rare, brief, and always slightly awkward. Our machines touch down, take measurements, and leave, like visitors who realize they are underdressed for the occasion. Every time we disturb the sediment, we leave behind traces that may last far longer than our presence. In this way, the abyss remembers us far better than we remember it, quietly recording our brief visits in its otherwise steady existence. The abyssal seafloor teaches an important lesson about perception. While what looks boring from a distance often hides complexity revealed only through patience and attention. The dramas here are not explosive or dramatic. They are subtle, incremental, and deeply persistent. In the abyss, nothing needs to rush. The stage is vast, the timeline is long, and every grain of sediment has all the time in the world to settle into its role. If the abyssal seafloor is the quiet floor of the deep ocean, then marine snow is the ceiling's slow apology for not providing room service. In a world without sunlight, plants, or fast-moving food chains, the abyssopelagic zone survives on a constant, gentle drizzle of organic material drifting down from far above. This process is known as marine snow, and despite the cozy name, it is less winter wonderland and more cosmic dust made of leftovers. What marine snow is made up of tiny particles that originate in the sunlit surface waters. Bits of dead plankton, fragments of larger organisms, microscopic shells, mucus, and waste products all clump together into flecks and flakes that begin a long downward journey. Individually, these particles are insignificant. Together, they form the primary food supply for vast regions of the deep ocean. It is a reminder that even in the most remote places on Earth, life depends on what falls through the cracks. The journey of marine snow is slow and uneven. These particles do not plunge straight down like stones. They drift, wobble, and swirl, carried by gentle currents as they descend through kilometers of water. Some flakes are consumed long before they reach the abyss. Others break apart, recombine, or dissolve entirely. Only a small fraction survives the trip intact, making the arrival of marine snow on the abyssal seafloor both precious and unpredictable. Down here, food does not come on a schedule. It comes when it comes. This slow rain of organic material shapes the entire deep-sea economy. There are no farms, no producers generating new energy from sunlight. Everything is recycled. Marine snow is the final expression of surface productivity, the last usable echo of photosynthesis. In that sense, the abyss is connected to the surface world in a quiet, one-way relationship. The surface sends scraps. The deep ocean makes them count. What makes marine snow particularly fascinating is how it transforms as it falls. Microorganisms colonize the particles almost immediately, feeding on them, breaking them down, and altering their chemical makeup. By the time a flake reaches the abyss, it is less like a fresh meal and more like a well-traveled snack that has passed through many hands. For abyssal life, this is normal. Gourmet dining is not an option. Efficiency is. The rate at which marine snow falls is astonishingly low. In some regions, only a thin dusting of material reaches the seafloor each year. Yet over long periods, this trickle adds up. It builds sediment layers, feeds communities, and sustains ecosystems that would otherwise collapse. The abyss does not need abundance. It needs consistency, and marine snow provides exactly that. Marine snow also introduces an element of randomness into abyssal life. Occasionally, larger pieces of organic matter break free and sink rapidly. A dead jellyfish, a fragment of a fish, or a mass of algae can descend much faster than typical snowflakes, delivering a sudden windfall to the sea floor. These events are rare and localized, but when they happen, they create temporary hotspots of activity. In a world defined by scarcity, a surprise meal is a big deal. The existence of marine snow challenges our assumptions about isolation. The abyss feels disconnected from the surface, but this slow rain ensures that it never truly is. Everything that happens above, from seasonal plankton blooms to large-scale ecological changes, eventually leaves a signature in the deep. The abyss records these changes not through headlines or alarms, but through subtle shifts in what falls from the sky. From a human perspective, marine snow is easy to overlook. It is invisible from the surface and underwhelming when seen up close. But its importance cannot be overstated. Without it, the abyss would be a nutritional desert, incapable of supporting the communities that exist there. Marine snow is the reason the deep ocean is not sterile. It is the quiet delivery system that keeps the abyss alive. In the Abyssopelagic zone, food does not arrive with fanfare. It drifts in silently, flake by flake, carrying the remnants of a world bathed in sunlight, down to a world that has never seen it. Marine snow is proof that even in the deepest darkness, life is still connected to the surface, sustained by a steady rain of forgotten crumbs. On the abyssal seafloor, ambition is overrated, speed is unnecessary, aggression is inefficient. The real winners down here are the scavengers, organisms that have mastered the art of waiting. Brittle stars, sea cucumbers, and other bottom-dwelling animals thrive in this environment not by chasing food, but by letting food come to them. In a place where meals fall from the sky at unpredictable intervals, patience is not a virtue. It is a lifestyle. Brittle stars are among the most common sights on the abyssal plains. At first glance, they look like delicate star-shaped ornaments scattered across the sediment. Their long, slender arms radiate outward, resting lightly on the seafloor. This posture is not laziness. It is strategy. Those arms act like living nets, positioned to intercept organic particles as they settle. When a bit of edible material drifts within reach, the arms guide it toward the mouth with slow, deliberate movements. There is no rush. The food is not going anywhere fast. Sea cucumbers take an even more literal approach to scavenging. They process the seafloor itself, ingesting sediment and extracting whatever organic material it contains. To call this glamorous would be optimistic, but it is effective. Sea cucumbers move methodically across the abyss, leaving behind trails of processed sediment that are noticeably different in texture. In doing so, they act as cleaners, recycling nutrients and subtly reshaping the seafloor. Their contribution is quiet but essential. Like janitors in a world that never closes. These scavengers are perfectly suited to an environment where food arrives in small, scattered amounts. Instead of specializing in specific prey, they are generalists, capable of consuming a wide range of organic matter. This flexibility is key. In the abyss, being picky is a liability. If something edible reaches the bottom, it is worth considering. Evolution here has favored creatures that treat mystery meals with curiosity rather than suspicion. Movement among abyssal scavengers is often slow and deliberate. There is no advantage to speed when resources are limited and competition is spread thin across vast areas. Energy conservation is paramount. Every motion is calculated, every action efficient. This creates an ecosystem where stillness is common and activity is subtle. To an outside observer, it might appear lifeless. In reality, it is simply operating on a different tempo. The feeding strategies of these animals also influence how the abyssal seafloor looks over time. As scavengers move and feed, they create patterns in the sediment, gently stirring and reworking the surface. These changes are not dramatic, but they accumulate over long periods. As scavengers help maintain the balance of materials on the seafloor, preventing organic matter from building up unevenly and ensuring that nutrients are redistributed across the plain. Another remarkable feature of abyssal scavengers is their tolerance for uncertainty. They do not know when the next meal will arrive. There are no cues, no smells drifting from afar, no predictable cycles to follow. Yet these animals persist, year after year, in an environment defined by scarcity. Their success lies in their ability to endure long stretches of minimal intake without panic. In a way, they are masters of delayed gratification, proving that sometimes the best survival strategy is simply not overreacting. These creatures also challenge our ideas of what an ecosystem should look like. On land, food webs are often complex and dynamic, with predators, prey, and constant interaction. In the abyss, the web is simpler, but no less effective. Scavengers occupy a central role, bridging the gap between what arrives from above and what remains in the sediment. They are the middle managers of the deep, quietly ensuring that nothing goes to waste. Human encounters with abyssal scavengers often inspire surprise rather than fear. There are no dramatic attacks, no sudden movements. Instead, there is a sense of calm persistence. These animals are not reacting to us. They are continuing their routines, indifferent to the presence of a strange, glowing machine nearby. Their lives are shaped by the long view, not by momentary disturbances. In the Abyssopelagic zone, scavengers embody the philosophy of the deep ocean. Move slowly. Use what you get. Waste nothing, or wait as long as necessary. In a world where resources are scarce and time is abundant, patience is not just rewarded. It is essential. One of the strangest surprises waiting in the abyss is size. Not everything down here is enormous, but when something is big, it is often shockingly big. Creatures that have modestly sized relatives in shallow waters suddenly appear supersized in the abyss, as if someone quietly turned the scale knob while no one was looking. This phenomenon, known as abyssal gigantism, feels counterintuitive at first. After all, this is a place where food is scarce and energy is precious. Why would growing large be a good idea in a world that barely feeds you? The answer begins with how size changes the rules of survival. Being large in the abyss is not about speed, dominance, or intimidation, and it is about efficiency and storage. A larger body can hold more energy reserves, allowing an animal to survive longer stretches between meals. In an environment where food arrives unpredictably and in small quantities, endurance matters more than agility. A big body is not a luxury, it is a long-term investment. Size also affects how energy is used. Larger animals tend to have slower metabolisms relative to their mass, meaning they burn energy more slowly than smaller ones. This is a crucial advantage in the abyss. A small creature may need to eat frequently just to stay alive, while a larger one can coast for extended periods on the same amount of food. In a place where meals are uncertain, the ability to wait comfortably is a powerful survival trait. Another factor influencing abyssal gigantism is temperature. Cold environments tend to favor larger body sizes because bigger bodies lose heat more slowly, while maintaining warmth is not the same concern in water as it is on land. The physics still matter. Larger animals experience less relative heat loss, which can reduce the energetic cost of staying functional in a consistently cold environment. Over evolutionary timescales, even small energy savings can tip the balance in favor of size. Pressure may also play a subtle role. While pressure itself does not directly cause animals to grow larger, it influences the physical and chemical environment in which growth occurs. High pressure affects how molecules interact and how tissues behave, potentially favoring sturdier, more robust body plans. Over time, this can contribute to lineages where larger forms are more successful than smaller ones. It is important to note that abyssal gigantism is not universal. Many abyssal animals remain small, and some are even smaller than their shallow water relatives. Size in the deep ocean is not a rule, but a strategy, one that works well under certain conditions and not others. Gigantism appears most often in groups where being large enhances survival without demanding frequent feeding or rapid movement. What makes abyssal giants especially fascinating is how calm they tend to be. These animals are not built for chase scenes. Their movements are deliberate, economical, and unhurried. Watching a large abyssal creature move is like watching geology in motion. There is no wasted effort, no sudden acceleration. Every action feels considered, as if the animal is constantly asking whether the movement is truly worth the energy. From a human perspective, encountering abyssal gigantism can be unsettling. Our instincts tell us that large animals are powerful and dangerous. In reality, most abyssal giants are not aggressive. They do not have the energy budget for theatrics. Their size is not about confrontation. It is about persistence. They are built to last, not to impress. Abyssal gigantism also highlights how evolution does not aim for efficiency in the way we often imagine. It does not seek minimalism or elegance. It seeks solutions that work. In the abyss, growing large happens to be one of those solutions, even if it seems contradictory at first glance. When food is rare and the environment is stable, being able to store energy and wait out lean times can outweigh the costs of maintaining a larger body. These oversized creatures remind us that the deep ocean plays by different rules. Scarcity does not always lead to smallness. Sometimes it leads to patience, endurance, and scale. In the Abyssopelagic zone, growing big is not about abundance. It is about surviving absence. If the surface ocean runs on caffeine, the Abyssopelagic zone runs on careful budgeting. Metabolism in the deep sea is not about maximizing performance or rapid growth. It is about making energy last as long as possible. In an environment where food arrives slowly and unpredictably, every calorie is treated like a valuable resource, not something to be burned for fun. Down here, metabolism is less of a race and more of a long-term savings plan. Metabolism refers to the chemical processes that keep an organism alive, from maintaining cells to enabling movement. Also, on the surface, higher metabolic rates often mean faster reactions, quicker growth, and greater activity. In the abyss, those traits would be disastrous. A fast metabolism would quickly drain energy reserves, leaving an organism vulnerable during long periods without food. As a result, many abyssal creatures operate at remarkably low metabolic rates, conserving energy by doing less, moving less, and reacting less. This slow metabolic pace influences behavior in noticeable ways. Movements are minimal and purposeful. There are no sudden dashes, no frantic escapes, no unnecessary gestures. When an abyssal animal moves, it is usually because it has a very good reason. Even feeding can be a relaxed affair, with organisms taking their time to process whatever organic material is available. In the abyss, urgency is a red flag, as anything that moves too fast is either in trouble or making a mistake. Low metabolism also affects growth and development. Many abyssal animals grow slowly, taking years or even decades to reach maturity. This slow growth is not a flaw, it is a feature. By spreading energy investment over long periods, these organisms reduce their risk of running out of resources. Growth becomes a steady, measured process rather than a sprint. The abyss does not reward impatience. Another consequence of slow metabolism is longevity. When energy use is minimized and environmental conditions remain stable, organisms can afford to live longer lives. While lifespan varies widely among abyssal species, many are believed to live far longer than their shallow water counterparts. Time in the abyss is not something to beat, it is something to inhabit. The chemical side of metabolism is also shaped by the abyssal environment. Enzymes, the molecules that drive metabolic reactions, function differently under deep-sea conditions. Abyssal organisms have enzymes adapted to operate efficiently at low temperatures and under immense pressure, allowing metabolic processes to proceed without requiring high energy input. This biochemical fine-tuning is one of the most impressive examples of adaptation in the deep ocean, even if it happens quietly and without spectacle. Low metabolic rates also influence how abyssal animals respond to stress. Sudden disturbances are rare in the deep ocean, and when they do occur, reacting explosively would be costly. Instead, many organisms respond slowly or not at all, conserving energy rather than panicking. This does not mean they are unresponsive. It means they are selective. Every reaction must justify its cost. From a human perspective, this way of life can feel almost alien. We associate success with speed, productivity, and constant motion. The abyss suggests a different model entirely. Here, survival is achieved by minimizing expenditure, avoiding unnecessary risks, and accepting long stretches of stillness. It is an ecosystem built around restraint. Even reproduction, which often demands significant energy, is shaped by metabolic constraints. Abyssal animals tend to reproduce in ways that minimize frequent energy investment, aligning their life cycles with the availability of resources rather than fixed schedules. This flexibility allows them to survive in an environment where consistency is rare, even if the overall conditions remain stable. So, metabolism in the Abyssopelagic zone is a reminder that life does not have a single preferred speed. It adjusts to its surroundings, sometimes by accelerating, sometimes by slowing, almost to a stop. In the deep ocean, success belongs to those who understand that doing less can actually achieve more. Here, life moves slowly, not because it is weak, but because it is wise. Reproduction in the Abyssopelagic zone is not a candlelit dinner situation. It is more like shouting into the dark and hoping someone answers eventually. The sheer vastness of the deep ocean means individuals are often separated by enormous distances, sometimes spending their entire lives without encountering another member of their species. In an environment where movement is slow and population densities are low, and finding a mate becomes one of the greatest challenges life has to solve. Unlike the surface ocean, where organisms can rely on crowded habitats or synchronize seasonal events, the abyss offers no such conveniences. There are no mass gatherings, no predictable cycles of abundance, no environmental signals like daylight or temperature shifts to coordinate timing. Reproduction here must function under conditions of isolation, uncertainty, and patience. Evolution, as always, found solutions that feel strange only because they are so effective. One common strategy is broadcasting. Some abyssal organisms release eggs and sperm into the water, relying on sheer numbers and probability to ensure that at least some of them meet. This may sound inefficient, but in a world where direct encounters are rare, as spreading reproductive material widely increases the odds. The abyss is large, but water movement, however subtle, helps distribute these materials across space. It is not romantic, but it is practical. Another approach is extreme specialization. In some species, individuals are adapted to detect even the faintest chemical traces left by others. These cues act like invisible messages drifting through the water, guiding potential mates together over long periods. Finding a partner can take years, and when it finally happens, it is not wasted. The encounter becomes a significant event, one that may never be repeated. Some abyssal animals have taken this challenge to its logical extreme by minimizing the need for repeated mating altogether. In certain cases, reproduction involves long-term physical attachment or highly skewed roles between individuals. This ensures that once a mate is found, the opportunity is not lost. It is a strategy that prioritizes certainty over flexibility, reflecting just how rare these encounters can be. The energy cost of reproduction also shapes how often it occurs. Producing eggs, sperm, or offspring requires significant resources, and in the abyss, energy is never guaranteed. Many organisms reproduce infrequently, timing their efforts to coincide with favorable conditions rather than fixed schedules. This opportunistic approach allows them to conserve energy during lean times and invest only when the odds are reasonable. Development in abyssal environments often reflects this same caution. Offspring may develop slowly, drifting or settling into the environment without urgency. There is no rush to grow quickly when the world around you is not going anywhere. Survival depends less on rapid maturation and more on enduring the long haul. From a human standpoint, abyssal reproduction challenges our assumptions about success. We often think of reproductive strategies in terms of abundance and frequency. In the abyss, success is measured by persistence. Producing fewer offspring that are well suited to the environment can be more effective than producing many that cannot survive the conditions. Quality, not quantity, becomes the quiet priority. There is also a remarkable lack of spectacle. Abyssal reproduction does not involve elaborate displays or dramatic courtship rituals, at least not in ways we can easily observe. Energy spent on showmanship would be poorly invested. Signals are subtle, chemical, or tactile rather than visual. In total darkness, flashy displays would be wasted anyway. Romance, if it can be called that, is understated and deeply practical. The difficulty of finding a mate also reinforces the sense of isolation that defines abyssal life. Each successful reproductive event represents an extraordinary convergence of chance, timing, and survival. It is not something that happens casually. It is something that happens despite the odds. In the Abyssopelagic zone, reproduction is not about abundance or passion. It is about persistence and opportunity. Life continues here not because it is easy, but because it has learned to wait, to adapt, and to take advantage of rare moments when the darkness briefly brings two paths together. Yet in a world without light, navigation becomes an exercise in creativity. Abyssal animals cannot rely on vision to guide them through their environment, so they have developed alternative ways of sensing the world around them. Touch, chemical detection, and subtle physical cues take center stage, forming a sensory toolkit that feels almost invisible to us, but works perfectly in the deep. In the Abyssopelagic zone, knowing where you are is less about seeing and more about feeling and smelling your way through existence. Touch is one of the most reliable senses in the abyss. Many animals are equipped with extended appendages, delicate arms, or sensitive surfaces that allow them to detect changes in their immediate surroundings. These structures act like living antennae, constantly sampling the environment for obstacles, food, or other organisms. Even slight disturbances in the water can carry useful information, and abyssal animals are remarkably attuned to these subtle signals. Chemical sensing, often compared to smell or taste, plays an equally important role. Organic material drifting through the water releases chemical signatures that can persist over long distances. Abyssal animals can detect these traces and follow them slowly and deliberately toward potential food or mates. In an environment where movement is costly, being able to interpret faint chemical clues is invaluable. The abyss may appear empty, but it is filled with information if you know how to read it. These chemical cues are not limited to food. They can also signal the presence of other organisms, recent activity, or changes in the environment. For abyssal animals, whilst the water itself is a kind of message board, carrying updates written in molecules rather than words. Understanding this chemical language allows them to navigate a world that would otherwise feel incomprehensible. Orientation in the abyss is also aided by an awareness of gravity and pressure. Even without visual landmarks, animals can sense which way is down and adjust their movements accordingly. This may sound trivial, but in a three-dimensional environment without light, maintaining orientation is essential. Losing track of direction could mean wasting energy or drifting away from resources. Some abyssal animals are sensitive to vibrations and low-frequency movements in the water. These signals travel efficiently through dense, cold water, providing information about distant events. And a subtle vibration might indicate the movement of another organism or the arrival of falling material from above. While these signals are not precise, they offer valuable context in an otherwise information-poor environment. Navigation in the abyss is not about precision, it is about probability. Animals do not need detailed maps or exact routes. They need enough information to make decisions that are good enough most of the time. Slow movement and low energy expenditure mean there is little penalty for gradual course correction. Over time, small adjustments add up to effective navigation. The sensory world of abyssal animals also reflects the stability of their environment. Without frequent disturbances or rapid changes, there is less need for high-resolution, fast-processing sensors. Instead, these animals are tuned for consistency, and they excel at detecting gradual changes and persistent signals rather than sudden events. This aligns perfectly with a world where nothing happens quickly. From a human perspective, this way of sensing the environment can feel alien. We rely heavily on sight and sound, often ignoring chemical and tactile information unless it becomes overwhelming. Abyssal animals invert this hierarchy. Vision is optional, sometimes even irrelevant. What matters is the quiet, continuous flow of information through water and contact. Understanding how abyssal animals navigate challenges our assumptions about intelligence and awareness. These organisms do not perceive their world the way we do, but that does not make their experience any less rich. It is simply tuned to a different set of priorities. In the Abyssopelagic zone, and knowing where you are does not require seeing the world. It requires listening to it in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. In the Abyssopelagic zone, sound becomes the closest thing to a long-distance messenger. Light is gone, touch is local, chemical signals are slow, but sound moves with confidence. It slips through cold, dense water with ease, travelling far beyond the reach of any eye. In a place defined by silence, sound does not shout, it lingers. And because it is so rare, every noise feels important, like a whisper in an empty cathedral. Water is an excellent medium for sound, much better than air, in fact. Sound waves move faster and farther underwater, losing less energy along the way. In the abyss, where conditions are stable and disturbances are minimal, sound can travel extraordinary distances without much interference. As this turns the deep ocean into a place where even subtle noises can carry meaning. When something makes a sound down here, it does not disappear quickly. It hangs around, drifting outward through the dark. What makes this especially eerie is how quiet the abyss usually is. There is no wind, no waves, no rain tapping on the surface. Geological activity is rare and distant. Biological noise is minimal because most animals move slowly and cautiously. The result is an environment where silence is the norm, not the absence. Against that backdrop, any sound becomes noticeable. A faint mechanical hum, a distant rumble, or a low-frequency vibration does not blend into background noise. It stands out. Because of this, sound in the abyss feels intimate. On the surface, noise is constant and often meaningless. Traffic, voices, machines, and all overlapping until individual sounds lose identity. In the deep ocean, there is no such clutter. When a sound appears, it feels directed, even if it is not. The brain, human or otherwise, cannot help but pay attention. In a quiet world, noise carries weight. Some abyssal animals are sensitive to sound and vibration, detecting low-frequency signals through their bodies, rather than through specialized ears. These vibrations can indicate movement, impact, or changes in the surrounding environment. Sound becomes a way of sensing activity at a distance, offering clues about events that cannot be seen. It is not a detailed picture, but it is enough to suggest that something, somewhere, is happening. The abyss also reveals an unusual contrast between natural and artificial sound. Natural noises tend to be subtle and infrequent, blending smoothly into the environment. Artificial sounds, such as those produced by human equipment, are different. They are often continuous, rhythmic, and unfamiliar. In the abyss, these sounds do not fade into noise pollution. They stand out sharply, like a ringtone going off in a library that has been silent for 1,000 years. Sound can also interact with the shape and structure of the deep ocean in surprising ways. Layers of water with different physical properties can bend or trap sound waves, allowing them to travel along specific paths. This means that a sound made in one location can be detected far away, sometimes without being heard in between. The abyss, in this sense, has its own acoustic architecture, guiding sound along invisible corridors. For humans exploring the deep, his sound becomes both a tool and a reminder of presence. Sonar pulses bounce off the seafloor and return as echoes, allowing us to map terrain we cannot see. At the same time, every sound we produce announces our arrival. In a place where quiet has reigned for ages, even the soft hum of a submersible is a disruption, a declaration that something unfamiliar has entered the scene. Emotionally, sound in the abyss can be unsettling. The combination of darkness and silence heightens awareness. When a noise occurs, there is no visual confirmation of its source. The mind fills in the gaps, often unhelpfully. This is not fear in the traditional sense, but a heightened alertness, a recognition that sound is the only hint of distant activity in an otherwise unknowable space. In the Abyssopelagic zone, sound replaces sight as the sense that reaches farthest. It carries information, context, and sometimes unease. It transforms the deep ocean into a place where silence is meaningful and noise is never casual. Down here, sound does not just travel, it resonates, reminding everything in the dark that even in near total quiet, the ocean is never truly still. When people hear the word bioluminescence, they often imagine neon blue waves or glowing jellyfish putting on a synchronized performance. The Abyssopelagic zone has no interest in that kind of showmanship. Down here, light is not entertainment. It is communication, manipulation, and defense, all compressed into brief, purposeful flashes. Bioluminescence in the abyss is not about being seen. It is about being understood, or misunderstood, at exactly the right moment. Bioluminescence is the ability of living organisms to produce light through chemical reactions inside their bodies. In the abyss, this ability is widespread, but its use is remarkably restrained. Producing light costs energy, and energy is not something to waste casually. As a result, abyssal bioluminescence tends to be minimal and precise. A flicker instead of a flare, a pulse instead of a glow. The deep ocean does not reward dramatic lighting choices. One of the most common uses of bioluminescence in the abyss is signaling. A brief flash can indicate presence, readiness, or identity. These signals are often species-specific, tuned to wavelengths and patterns that make sense to those who need to see them and remain meaningless to everyone else. In a place where visual communication is rare, and a single flash can carry more information than a long conversation on the surface, bioluminescence is also used as deception. Some animals produce light to lure others closer, mimicking the appearance of food or signaling opportunity where none exists. In the abyss, curiosity can be fatal, and light is an effective way to exploit it. A small, drifting glow can draw attention in an otherwise dark environment, guiding unsuspecting organisms into close proximity. The light itself does not need to be bright, it only needs to be noticeable. Defense is another critical role for bioluminescence. Some abyssal animals emit sudden flashes when disturbed, startling potential threats or drawing attention to the encounter. In a quiet environment, unexpected light is disruptive. It can confuse, disorient, or attract even larger predators. In this way, much bioluminescence acts like a burglar alarm, announcing that something unusual is happening and potentially shifting the balance of risk. There are also species that use light as camouflage, producing illumination that matches faint ambient conditions to reduce contrast. This technique, often called counter-illumination, helps organisms blend in rather than stand out. It is a subtle use of light that requires fine control and precise timing. In the abyss, invisibility is often more valuable than visibility. What makes abyssal bioluminescence particularly fascinating is how controlled it is. These animals are not glowing constantly. They turn their lights on and off as needed, sometimes producing light in specific body parts while keeping the rest dark. This level of control suggests a deep evolutionary refinement, as where light production has been shaped to meet very specific needs rather than broad display. The colors of bioluminescence in the abyss are also telling. Most emitted light falls within a narrow range, optimized for transmission through deep water and detection by other organisms. This is not an artistic choice. It is physics meeting biology. Certain wavelengths travel farther and are more easily perceived, making them more useful in a vast, dark environment. For human observers, Encountering bioluminescence in the abyss can be surreal. A sudden flash in the darkness feels almost supernatural, as if the environment itself is responding. But to the organisms that live there, these lights are as ordinary as gestures or sounds are to us. They are part of the language of the deep, spoken sparingly but fluently. And bioluminescence also reinforces the idea that the abyss is not passive. It may appear still and dark, but it is full of interactions happening just beyond our perception. Each flash represents a decision, a reaction, or a strategy playing out in real time. Light, in this context, is not decoration. It is intent made visible. In the Abyssopelagic zone, bioluminescence is not about illuminating the world. It is about punctuating the darkness with meaning. A brief spark in an endless night, carefully placed, carefully timed, and never wasted. It is tempting to imagine the deep ocean as one continuous plunge, a single downward slide into darkness that just keeps going until it hits the bottom. In reality, the ocean is layered and structured, and not all deep places are the same kind of deep. As the Abyssopelagic zone is often confused with the deepest parts of the ocean, but this does it a quiet injustice. The abyss is not the ocean's basement, it is the ocean's main floor. The truly deepest regions are something else entirely. The Abyssopelagic zone is defined by its breadth as much as its depth. It stretches across enormous areas of the planet, forming wide, relatively flat plains that cover much of the seafloor. These plains are stable, ancient, and expansive. They feel endless, like a desert that forgot how to be dry. When you travel across the abyss, you are not descending dramatically. You are moving horizontally across a landscape that just happens to exist far below the surface. Trenches, by contrast, are abrupt and extreme. They are not plains. They are sudden drops, narrow and steep, or carved into the seafloor, like the planet accidentally left a door open and gravity took advantage of it. These regions descend far deeper than the abyss, plunging into depths that are geologically rare and spatially limited. If the abyss is a continent, trenches are cracks in that continent, sharp and specific, rather than broad and uniform. This distinction matters because the conditions in trenches are not simply a more intense version of the abyss. They are different in character. The Abyssopelagic zone is shaped by slow accumulation and stability. Trenches are shaped by tectonic forces, where massive plates of Earth's crust collide, slide, and sink. The result is an environment defined by steep walls, confined spaces, and a sense of verticality that the abyss largely lacks. The abyss feels open. Trenches feel enclosed. In the abyss, the seafloor stretches out in all directions with little variation. In trenches, the terrain funnels downward, creating a sense of depth that is not just measured in meters but felt in orientation. You are not on a plane anymore. You are inside something. This changes how materials move, how sediments accumulate, and how life interacts with the environment. Another key difference lies in scale. The Abyssopelagic zone covers vast portions of the ocean floor, making it one of the largest habitats on Earth. Trenches, despite their dramatic depths, occupy a tiny fraction of the ocean by area. They are impressive, but they are not representative. If the deep ocean were a book, trenches would be footnotes written in very intense language. This is why the abyss often gets overlooked in favour of trenches. Trenches are easier to dramatize. They have records, superlatives, and dramatic names. The abyss does not chase attention. It simply exists, quietly dominating the planet's deep-sea real estate. Its importance lies not in extremes, but in prevalence. Most of the deep ocean is abyss, not trench. The difference also affects how we think about exploration. Studying the abyss means dealing with vast distances and uniform conditions. Studying trenches means dealing with depth extremes and geological complexity. Both are challenging, but in different ways. The abyss tests endurance and patience. Trenches test limits and precision. Confusing the two can lead to misunderstandings about how the deep ocean actually functions. Ecologically, this separation is crucial. The Abyssopelagic zone represents a stable backdrop against which other deep environments stand out. And trenches are exceptions, not the rule. They introduce variability and extremes into a system that is otherwise remarkably consistent. Understanding the abyss helps scientists recognize what is typical for the deep ocean, making it easier to identify what is truly unusual. Thinking of the abyss as flat does not mean thinking of it as dull. Flat, in this context, means expansive and continuous. It is the stage upon which most deep-sea processes unfold. Trenches are dramatic interruptions in that stage, not its foundation. By distinguishing the Abyssopelagic zone from deeper trench regions, we gain a clearer picture of the ocean's architecture. The abyss is not the deepest place on Earth, but it is the most widespread deep place. It is the quiet, steady heart of the deep ocean, while trenches are its sharp, sudden punctuations. The Abyssopelagic zone does not look like a climate hero. There are no forests waving in the current, no lush greenery absorbing gases, no visible signs of productivity. And yet, this dark, silent region plays one of the most important roles in regulating Earth's carbon balance. It does so without fanfare, without visible effort, and without ever checking whether anyone is paying attention. Carbon moves through Earth's systems in complex loops, cycling between the atmosphere, oceans, living organisms, and geological storage. The abyss acts as a long-term holding zone in this cycle, a place where carbon can be removed from active circulation and stored for extended periods. This process does not happen through a single dramatic event. It happens through countless small steps, repeated endlessly over time. And much of the carbon that ends up in the abyss begins its journey at the surface. There, carbon dioxide is taken up by microscopic organisms and incorporated into organic matter. When those organisms die or release waste, some of that carbon begins to sink. Over long distances and long durations, a fraction of it reaches the deep ocean and eventually the abyssal seafloor. This slow descent is not efficient, but it does not need to be. Even small percentages matter when the system operates continuously across the entire planet. Once carbon reaches the abyss, it tends to stay there. The conditions in the deep ocean slow down processes that would otherwise return carbon to the atmosphere. Low temperatures, limited disturbance, and slow chemical reactions all contribute to this retention. The carbon becomes part of deep water masses or is incorporated into sediments, effectively removed from short-term cycling. In climate terms, this is significant. Carbon that stays in the abyss is carbon that is not warming the surface. The abyss also serves as a buffer. It absorbs changes from the surface slowly and releases them even more slowly. This dampening effect smooths out fluctuations that would otherwise be more extreme. While the abyss cannot prevent rapid changes entirely, it plays a role in moderating Earth's climate over long timescales. It is not a quick fix. It is a slow stabilizer. What makes this role especially remarkable is how passive it appears. The abyss does not actively seek out carbon. It simply exists as a deep, cold, stable environment where carbon naturally accumulates when given enough time. Gravity does the work. Physics does the work. The abyss provides the space and the patience. Sediments on the abyssal seafloor are an important part of this process. As carbon-rich material settles and becomes buried, it can remain trapped for thousands to millions of years. Each layer of sediment represents carbon that has been effectively locked away, removed from the fast-moving cycles of the surface world. These layers accumulate so slowly that they are easy to ignore, but over geological time, their impact is immense. The abyss's role in the carbon cycle also highlights how interconnected Earth's systems are. Events at the surface, from biological productivity to human activity, eventually leave a trace in the deep ocean. The abyss records these changes quietly, integrating them into its long-term storage. It does not react quickly, but it does respond eventually. This slow response is both a strength and a vulnerability. On one hand, it provides stability. On the other, it means that disruptions introduced at the surface can have lasting consequences that take a very long time to reverse. Once carbon enters the abyssal storage system, it is not easily removed. The abyss remembers. From a human perspective, the abyss's contribution to climate regulation is easy to overlook because it does not fit our expectations of action. There are no visible transformations, no immediate feedback, no dramatic turning points. The abyss works on timescales that extend beyond individual lifetimes and even beyond civilizations. Its effectiveness lies precisely in its quiet persistence. In the Abyssopelagic zone, carbon is not celebrated or displayed. It is archived. Layer by layer, hot particle by particle, the deep ocean absorbs and stores carbon, shaping Earth's climate in ways that are subtle but profound. The abyss may never get applause for this role, but the planet depends on it all the same. Human curiosity about the Abyssopelagic zone began long before we had any realistic way of visiting it. Early exploration was less about going there and more about reaching blindly into the dark and hoping something interesting came back. 19th century scientists lowered dredges and nets over the sides of ships, hauling them back up hours later with whatever the deep ocean had reluctantly surrendered. These samples were often damaged, incomplete, and confusing, but they carried a revolutionary message. The abyss was not empty. Those early dredges were crude tools by modern standards. As they scraped along the seafloor without precision, mixing organisms, sediment, and debris into a single mysterious haul, scientists argued endlessly over what these samples meant. Some doubted they truly came from great depths. Others questioned whether life could really exist so far below the surface. The abyss, at this stage, was less a place and more a rumor supported by muddy evidence. As technology advanced, so did ambition. Weighted cables, reinforced equipment, and better navigation allowed researchers to sample deeper and more deliberately. But for a long time, exploration remained indirect. Humans were not visiting the abyss. We were collecting souvenirs and trying to reconstruct the experience from fragments, like archaeologists working from a handful of broken tools. The idea of actually sending humans or human-made vehicles into the abyss required a leap not just in engineering, but in mindset. The deep ocean does not forgive improvisation. Everything must work the first time, and preferably keep working without maintenance. This makes abyssal exploration slow, expensive, and logistically intense. Each mission requires specialized ships, trained crews, and equipment that may cost tens of millions of dollars. And that is before anything even goes wrong. Modern exploration relies heavily on submersibles and remotely operated vehicles. These machines are designed to function autonomously or under remote control, performing tasks like mapping, sampling, and observation. They move slowly, deliberately, and cautiously, because haste at great depth is an excellent way to turn a scientific mission into a very expensive lesson. Even with all this preparation, dives are short, rare, and carefully rationed. What surprises many people is how infrequent these visits are. Despite living on a planet dominated by ocean, humans have physically explored only a tiny fraction of the abyss. In contrast, space exploration, while also costly and complex, benefits from clearer paths, reusable infrastructure, and far more public attention. Going to orbit has become routine by comparison. Visiting the abyss remains exceptional. Part of this imbalance is psychological. Space feels like the ultimate frontier, filled with stars, planets, and the promise of discovery. The abyss feels closer, darker, and harder to romanticize. There are no dramatic launch sequences, and no sweeping views of Earth from above. Instead, there is a slow descent into darkness, and hours of careful observation. It is exploration without spectacle, which makes it harder to sell despite being just as challenging. Risk is another major factor. In space, problems are dangerous, but they unfold in an environment where rescue and communication are often possible. In the abyss, isolation is immediate and absolute. Equipment failures cannot be repaired easily. Missions must be planned with the assumption that help will not arrive quickly, if at all. This raises the stakes for every decision and inflates the cost of caution. Human presence in abyssal exploration has therefore been limited. Most missions rely on machines rather than people, not because of lack of bravery, but because robots are easier to replace. Even so, each dive represents years of planning and collaboration across disciplines. Engineers, scientists, technicians, and navigators all contribute to a single opportunity to observe a place that remains stubbornly out of reach. Despite these challenges, exploration continues, driven by the simple fact that the abyss matters. It influences Earth's systems, hosts unique forms of life, and holds answers to questions we have not yet learned how to ask properly. Every mission expands our understanding slightly, filling in small gaps in a very large picture. Human exploration of the Abyssopelagic zone is a story of patience rather than conquest. It advances in careful steps, constrained by physics, budgets, and humility. We do not stride into the abyss. We are allowed brief visits, during which we observe quietly and try not to break anything. And even now, after decades of effort, we have explored more of the moon than we have of the deep ocean beneath our own feet. For most of human history, the Abyssopelagic zone felt safely out of reach, a place so distant and inaccessible that it seemed immune to our influence. Unfortunately, distance has never been a reliable form of protection. As our technology has advanced, traces of human activity have followed us into the deepest parts of the ocean, proving once again that if we can affect something, we eventually will. One of the most visible signs of human impact in the abyss is pollution. Materials discarded at the surface do not always stay there. Plastics, synthetic fibers, and other debris break down into smaller pieces that drift downward over time. Some of these particles eventually settle on the abyssal seafloor, where they can persist for decades or longer. In an environment defined by slow change, even small amounts of pollution can accumulate and linger. Chemical pollutants follow similar paths. Substances released into the ocean through industrial processes can attach to sinking particles and make their way into deep waters. Once there, they are not easily diluted or removed. The abyss does not flush itself quickly. It holds on to what it receives, integrating human byproducts into systems that evolved without them. Perhaps the most concerning emerging impact is deep-sea mining. The abyssal seafloor contains mineral-rich deposits that are increasingly attractive to industries seeking resources for modern technologies. These deposits form over extremely long timescales, often millimeters per million years, in making them effectively non-renewable on human timelines. Extracting them would involve heavy machinery, disturbing large areas of seafloor, disrupting sediment layers that have remained stable for centuries. The physical disturbance caused by mining is not subtle. Sediment plumes stirred up by machinery can spread far beyond the mining site, settling over surrounding areas and altering habitats. In the abyss, where disturbance is rare and recovery is slow, these changes can persist for generations. Tracks left by experimental equipment decades ago are still visible, a reminder that the deep ocean does not bounce back quickly. Noise is another form of impact that often goes unnoticed. Industrial activity introduces sustained sound into an environment that evolved in near silence, while abyssal ecosystems are adapted to quiet. The continuous noise can interfere with sensory processes, adding stress to organisms that rely on subtle signals to navigate and interact. In a place where sound carries far, this intrusion is not localized. It spreads. Climate change also leaves its fingerprints on the abyss, though indirectly. Changes at the surface eventually propagate downward, altering deep water properties over long periods. The abyss responds slowly, but it does respond. Once changes reach these depths, they can be difficult to reverse, locking in consequences that persist long after surface conditions have shifted again. What makes human impact in the abyss particularly troubling is the mismatch between timescales. Human activities operate on years or decades. Abyssal systems operate on centuries or millennia. A short-term disturbance from our perspective can become a long-term alteration for the deep ocean. The abyss does not have the capacity to quickly absorb or adapt to rapid change. There is also the problem of invisibility. Because the abyss is out of sight, its degradation is easy to ignore. Damage happens far from cameras, far from coastlines, and far from immediate human consequences. This makes it tempting to treat the deep ocean as a convenient dumping ground or resource reserve, rather than as a living system with intrinsic value. Understanding human impact in the abyss requires a shift in perspective. The fact that we rarely visit does not mean our actions do not reach it. The abyss is connected to the rest of the ocean, and the rest of the ocean is connected to us. What we introduce at the surface does not vanish. It sinks. It settles and stays. In the Abyssopelagic zone, human presence is faint but unmistakable. It appears as plastic fibers in sediment, chemical traces in deep water, and scars on the seafloor. These marks remind us that no place on Earth is truly beyond our reach anymore. The challenge now is deciding whether our reach will continue to arrive as a mess, or finally learn how to tread lightly even in the deepest dark. Time behaves strangely in the Abyssopelagic zone. Not because clocks stop working, but because the rhythms that define life at the surface simply do not apply. There are no seasons marked by light, no daily cycles driven by sunrise and sunset, no sudden environmental shifts demanding rapid response. In the abyss, time stretches. It does not rush, it settles. For many abyssal organisms, the life unfolds at a pace that feels almost geological. Growth is slow, often imperceptible from year to year. Lifespans can extend far beyond what we expect for animals of similar size elsewhere. This is not a result of luxury, but of necessity. In a place where energy is scarce and conditions are stable, rushing offers no advantage. Survival belongs to those who wait well. Reproduction, growth, and movement are all shaped by this extended sense of time. An animal in the abyss may take years to reach maturity, and even longer to replace itself. Each individual represents a significant investment of time and resources. There is no room for waste, and no pressure to hurry. The abyss does not reward speed. It rewards endurance. The environment itself reinforces this mindset, and the abyssal sea floor changes slowly as sediments accumulate layer by layer, each one representing a quiet passage of years. Disturbances are rare, and when they occur, their effects linger. A single event can leave a mark that remains visible for decades, sometimes longer. In such a setting, the past is never far away. It is quite literally underfoot. From a human perspective, this slowness can feel unsettling. We are accustomed to quick feedback, rapid change, and measurable progress. The abyss offers none of that. It does not react on our timescale. If something changes down there, it will take a very long time for the consequences to become apparent. And once they do, they will be very hard to undo. This mismatch in temporal perspective creates challenges for understanding and stewardship. When damage occurs in the abyss, while it may not look dramatic, there are no immediate collapses, no sudden disappearances that force attention. Instead, there is a gradual shift, subtle and easy to overlook, unfolding over years while the rest of the world moves on. The animals of the abyss are perfectly adapted to this slow world. Their behaviors, life histories, and interactions all assume continuity rather than disruption. They expect tomorrow to look like today, and next year to look much the same. Evolution has shaped them for reliability, not volatility. In this sense, the abyss is a place where patience is not just a virtue, but a biological strategy. Even decay operates on a different clock. Organic material breaks down slowly, consumed bit by organisms adapted to extract value from scarcity. Nothing is wasted, but nothing is hurried either. The abyss treats matter the way it treats time, carefully and without urgency. This slow tempo also affects how the abyss responds to change introduced from outside. When new influences arrive, they do not trigger immediate transformation. Instead, they are absorbed gradually, their effects spreading quietly through the system. By the time the full impact becomes clear, the cause may be long forgotten at the surface. In the Abyssopelagic zone, time is not measured in moments, but in persistence. Life is built to last, not to rush. This makes the abyss both resilient and vulnerable. Resilient because it can endure long periods without disruption. Vulnerable because once disrupted, it takes an equally long time to recover. Standing at the edge of this understanding forces a kind of humility. The abyss does not operate on human schedules, and it does not respond to human impatience. It reminds us that not all systems are designed for speed, and not all problems can be solved quickly. In the deep ocean, urgency feels like a surface invention, something that never quite made the journey down. Time in the abyss flows steadily, silently, and without concern for deadlines. And in that slow, unbroken flow, life has found a way to persist, one careful moment at a time. When you step back and consider the Abyssopelagic zone as a whole, it becomes clear that its most defining feature is not any single organism, process, or extreme condition. It is scale. The abyss is vast beyond intuition, stretching beneath the oceans as a continuous, shadowed presence that covers much of the planet. It is not a remote corner of Earth. It is Earth, yet quietly occupying the majority of its habitable space. What makes the abyss remarkable is how little it demands from our attention while supporting systems that the surface depends on. It does not announce itself. It does not change quickly. It does not provide dramatic visuals or immediate feedback. Instead, it operates steadily, maintaining balance through consistency. The abyss is not flashy, but it is foundational. Throughout this journey, the abyss has revealed itself as a place defined by restraint. Energy is conserved, movements are deliberate, signals are subtle. Time stretches, nothing is wasted, and nothing is rushed. This economy of existence is not a limitation. It is an adaptation to a world where stability is the rule and excess is a liability. The abyss also challenges how we define importance. On the surface, our value is often associated with visibility, productivity, and speed. In the deep ocean, importance is measured by persistence and quiet influence. The abyss does not compete for attention, yet it shapes planetary systems in ways that are both profound and enduring. It is easy to forget how much of Earth exists beyond our everyday experience. We live on a thin, illuminated skin surrounded by air and sunlight, and we tend to treat that environment as the default. The abyss reminds us that this is the exception. Most of our planet is dark, cold, and deep, governed by rules that feel almost alien simply because we rarely encounter them. There is also a lesson in humility embedded in the Abyssopelagic zone. Despite our technological advances and exploratory ambitions, this realm remains largely unexplored. We have mapped its contours in broad strokes, but its details remain elusive. The abyss does not yield its secrets easily, and it does not care whether we understand it or not. It functions regardless. At the same time, the abyss is not separate from us. It is connected to the surface through physical, chemical, and biological pathways that operate continuously, whether we acknowledge them or not. Actions taken in the shallow world eventually echo in the deep. The abyss listens, even if it never speaks. What is perhaps most striking is how calmly the abyss does its work. There is no sense of urgency, no visible strain. Processes unfold at their own pace, guided by physics, chemistry, and biology working in quiet coordination. While human societies argue, accelerate, and react, the abyss remains steady. It's a reminder that not all systems thrive on chaos. In this way, the Abyssopelagic zone offers perspective. It shows us a version of Earth that is not built around immediacy or spectacle. It suggests that endurance, balance, and patience can be just as powerful as speed and innovation. The deep ocean has been operating successfully for millions of years, long before human debates ever began. As we look toward the future, the abyss stands as both a safeguard and a responsibility. Its stability supports the planet, but that stability is not infinite. Understanding the abyss is not about conquering it or exploiting it. It is about recognizing its role and respecting the timescales on which it operates. The Abyssopelagic zone may never become familiar or comfortable to us, and that is fine. Its value does not depend on our presence. It exists as a vast, silent partner in Earth's systems, doing its job without applause, recognition, or interruption. Most of our planet lives in darkness, far from the noise of the surface. Down there, the abyss continues its work, unbothered by arguments, deadlines, or headlines. And perhaps the most humbling realization of all is this. While we debate the future of Earth in the light, The abyss has been quietly sustaining it all along.